If you've got kids, join me, Jana, on Story Nori, the Stories podcast. Meet Birdie, an ancient wise old bird, and best friends with a young boy called Jake. He's always around when Jake needs advice and help. And follow the adventures of Jimmy Mouse. Follow Story Nori and let your imagination soar, just like Birdie.
Have you ever heard the term battle buddy? For those of you that haven't, and for those of you that have, here's what it is. A battle buddy is a partner assigned to a soldier to assist them in and out of combat. In today's episode, Shannon Walker of Northwest Battle Buddies, she joins me, and her organization is really aptly named. Shannon's been training dogs for almost 30 years professionally. Her dog training journey has been one at the highest levels. And on that journey, back in 2011, she was thrust into training dogs for veterans suffering with PTSD. Are you aware approximately 22 veterans commit suicide every day? Now just think about that for just a second. That's 8,000 per year. Now you can't cure PTSD, and let me say that again, you can't cure PTSD, but you certainly can help those in need. Now here's some history of PTSD. During the Civil War, it was called soldier's heart. During World War I, it was called shell shock. And then in World War II, it was called battle fatigue. And then Vietnam, it was called Vietnam syndrome. It wasn't really until 1986 that the term PTSD actually became official. They began using dogs as actual service dogs back in 1916, and it's really come a long way to what Shannon is doing for our modern day heroes today. Shannon's dedication just shines through in her telling of this amazing story. It's a story of mutual assistance where the veteran and the service dog depend on each other for support and care. Now, get this, the dogs go through months and months of rigorous training, and all of that Shannon does at no cost to the veterans. You know how it's just the little things in life that make a difference? Well, Shannon's passion in providing both the veteran and the dog the training and support needed and giving all those deserving a chance to a healthier quality of life, well, it's a big thing and it's making a big difference. So I salute the veterans, the dogs, and you, Shannon, for doing such an important service. This episode is simply inspiring, and you're going to love the journey she takes us on. And I, for one, can't wait for you to hear her story.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today, my guest is Shannon Walker. She's with Northwest Battle Buddies, and we're going to get into some really cool stuff, some intense stuff, but I'm really excited to have you, Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the show, and let's just start getting into it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, Mark. Super excited about it today, and excited for what, the next few minutes are going to bring.
Well, you've got a great message and what you're doing is pretty wonderful. But, I one of the reasons why I want to do this thing, other than just being selfish and wanting to learn new stuff, is I want to get good messages out there to find people that can help others as well. So that's important to me. Obviously, it's important to you. But before we get into Battle Buddies, let's talk a little bit about you. You've got an extensive background in the dog world. Can we just kind of get started how you must have been a dog lover your entire life or whatever, but can we just kind of walk through that and then kind of get to Battle Buddies?
Absolutely. I just recently started talking about all that stuff. I have been a dog lover my whole life. In fact, I've been an animal lover my whole life, but especially dogs, of course. And, God forbid any dog stand on the sidewalk in front of their yard or their house because I just thought they were lost and had to have me. And so I wanted to save the world and fed every animal that I thought I could feed. And I just loved animals. I was always a tomboy, never liked dolls, but I had every stuffed animal there was. And, just thought I was going to be a veterinarian and really wanted to go that path until I worked at a veterinarian and totally have a lot of respect for the industry. But dang, I cried all the time. I'm not built for that. I'm built for apparently what I do. And so, yeah, I got my first dog when her name was Buttons, and she was a little black cockapoo. And she just ended up being the beginning of my journey with the value that dogs brought to me, not only in joy, but companionship, but emotionally. And I remember as a little girl, I was in like third grade, and we moved to this, out into the country, and there was this little creek. Don't worry, I couldn't have drowned in it, but it was a creek enough, the water was moving enough that I could like jump out on the big rocks.
Sure.
And I would sit there with all the water rushing by, and I would sit there with with Buttons in my lap, and I would be talking to God and contemplating life. And I remember doing that at that age. And it kind of hasn't changed. The breeds have changed, and what I do with them has changed, but they've always brought tremendous meaning. And I just had dogs my whole life. I didn't care how unruly they were because I just loved them so much. It didn't matter to me. And then when I met the man that I was going to marry, he just wasn't the dog lover I was, and we didn't stay married. Surprise. But I had a German Shepherd dog, and the dog was like 8 months old. He's like, get him trained or get rid of him. And getting rid of him was not an option. And so I did what a lot of people do, and I started to seek out trainers, which that's something growing up in the cowboy town I was in, that just wasn't a thing. But where I moved to Tennessee, it was. And I ended up being introduced to the Schutzhund sport. Schutzhund is a sport out of Europe. It's the protection dog. It's much like police dog training. And I fell in love with it. When I saw my first Schutzhund dog, a handler working his dog, the beauty and the connection of the precision of the protection, tracking, and obedience that they did was the most beautiful thing to me. And immediately I was in love and I wanted to do it.
Okay, I want to pause for a second. So it's not a Shih Tzu because most people out there are going to maybe thinking that. Can you kind of give it a little bit more detail what Shih Tzu is actually?
Yeah.
I read it on your profile, but for other people, because I've never heard of it myself, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Schutzhund, it's Schutzhund, Schutzhund, basically I think it actually means protection dog in German, but it's a sport that is much like police dog training. You're looking at protection, tracking, and obedience. It's a very high drive sport, powerful. You see a lot of German Shepherd dogs, a lot of Malinois. Even I competed with a Rottweiler in Europe in 2003 doing that sport. And it's a sport that is a powerful sport. It's full of a lot of precision, fast pace, obedience on leash, off leash, obedience under gunfire, obstacle courses, but it's just incredible work. And then the protection dog. I mean, sending the dog for the bad guy, having him tackle him, calling him back, all of that. And I fell in love with that sport when I saw the dog and the connection between the dog and the handler.
Right.
I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. I didn't know dogs could do that. And even though I was just seeking out to learn obedience, I fell in love with something that would actually change the trajectory of my life.
So basically, it's a synchronized swimming of dog training.
Oh, you know what? That is so good. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. I mean, you want to talk about a connection of the minds
Right.
in that sport. It is just, and I love it. I mean, I love the sport today. I just don't compete anymore. But I competed for 10 years. I won the regionals a couple times. I had competed in, the nationals as far as, in the, what's the word I'm looking for? I competed in the nationals in the confirmation ring. But then I actually went to Europe. I went to Diest, Belgium in 2003, and I competed against 13 countries with a female Rottweiler named Yana. And in my category, I won.
Wow.
And it was a sport. It just gave so much to me, but it opened up the beauty of the dog world in that way to me that I'd only known love and affection and playing and antics in the home, but I had no idea when you really invest correct time and repetition for a common goal with a dog, how fulfilling it could be, other than the birth of my children. The very first time I ever won the regionals and I stood on the podium with my first dog, it was one of the greatest moments of my life. And because it was something I felt that was unattainable, that it's like, could I really do that? And it was just a ton of work. But to share that moment with an animal, with my dog, was just a very safe place. And it was just celebrated inside. It was just incredible to me. And what happened is people would see me working my dogs in the parking lot, not in the parking lot, but in the park. And I was fast forward a few years, I got married, I had twin boys. Well, right away with my twins, early on being married, I realized I had to be able to make money, and I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so when people started asking me for help training their dog, because a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, I knew more than I knew yesterday. So, but I started helping people, and my goal was to train 4 dogs a month, and then I could be a stay-at-home mom. And that's what I did. And that was the beginning. I started my for-profit business, Man's Best Friend, and it's still going strong. I've trained thousands and thousands of dogs in that for-profit business, but it allowed me to be a stay-at-home mom through my divorce, allowed me to raise my boys, and we lacked nothing. It was just an incredible blessing. So, now, my ex-husband, when he's like, get the dog trained or get rid of him, I had no idea what that journey would lead me to, how it would be in my profession, like a saving grace in my life.
I have a question for you. Just from thought process, having children as well. Most kids respond really well with structure.
Mm-hmm.
And you have kids. Do you find that the same way with when you're training dogs, that they actually appreciate the structure?
Oh, they have to have it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have to have it to thrive. They're pack animals, and they have to have boundaries. There is order. There is a hierarchy. They correct each other. They enjoy each other, but there's absolutely a pack etiquette that in order to have a successful dog-human relationship, the human has to bring that into the relationship with the dog for the dog to thrive.
Right.
And we teach our veterans that. We teach our clients that. I mean, that's what we do. We teach people how to live with a species that is a completely foreign species to them. And it's awesome. It's awesome to see all the wins and the victories and the life changes that happen.
So I know, and kind of educate me, because I may be wrong in this. You grew up in Pendleton and then moved to Tennessee, and now you're back in. Did you move? Walk me through that journey a little bit too, and the path of the structured dogs, I guess is a good way of saying it.
Yeah. So I grew up in Pendleton, Oregon when I was 24 years old, and I had the best life. I have the best family.
Great shirts too.
Oh, yes. My dad taught me to believe in God, family, and country. I never back talked to my father once in my life.
Was he a military guy too?
He was. He served during the Korean War.
Okay.
And my mom, and who lives with me now, she'll be 81 in December. She lives with me, which is a blessing. And but she was just always a soft place to land, and it was really good. She was a good contrast to my dad. And but I grew up in a loving home. We supported each other. Family came first, and they really set an example that I wanted to really model for my boys. And that was part of actually a real struggle for me, because my dad died right before their 50th wedding anniversary, and I ended up getting divorced after 15 years. And so that was a real struggle for me, trying to give my children the best and dealing with all that stuff. But when it's all said and done, my boys are amazing. They work with me, and it all turned out wonderful. But I was in Pendleton at 24 years old. I moved. I had a girlfriend that wanted to be a country singer, and she says, "I'll move to Tennessee if you go with me." And I said, "Yes." And we just moved. You're 24 and you don't have any ties. You're like, "Let's do this thing." And I ended up meeting the man I would marry. I lived there for 5 years. And after my boys were born, at 4 months old, I had twin boys, Jared and Jacob. I wanted to move home because, the culture there, as wonderful as it is, was very different.
Sure.
And the small towns I was in had a different mindset about achievement. There was just a lot of things that I didn't want my boys to adopt growing up. So We ended up moving back here. So now I live in Washington State. That's where we ended up moving. My parents were living in Portland, Oregon at that time. So we lived with them for a year, got our own home, lived in Washington, and have been here ever since. And the piece of property that we train dogs on now and do everything, I've been here for like 26 years.
And that's in Battleground?
Battleground, Washington. Yep.
Seems apropos with the name. I thought it was pretty funny when I was looking at that.
Yeah, it is, which has nothing to do with the name Northwest Battle Buddies, but
Yeah, I know, but it's weird.
yeah, it works though. It really works. Yep.
Did I tell you when we talked that first time, I actually went to school in Corvallis, so I know that area pretty well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, well then you won't be going to be surprised
Yeah.
that we've been in the rain for days now.
Man, I tell you, I had a scholarship to play football up there, and I came from Southern California, and I every time I came home, it would ruin me because I'd be home for sunny days and have to go back to those gray, drizzly days. That's crazy.
It is. Well, you learn to, I think in any climate, you just learn to tolerate the extremes or, the extended whatever it might be. Cause it is, there's good things everywhere.
Sure.
Although I will tell you, I am looking to move at some point just because I would like to have 100 acres and do a different thing, not a different thing other than dogs, but I'm just saying, so.
We go down to Bend, it's a lot drier there.
Yeah, I don't know if I've been. I actually own a house in Wyoming as well.
Oh, really?
I am a huge fan of Wyoming and Montana. I love it there.
My son went to school in Montana. I love Montana. I fly fish. I love it up there.
Oh, my dad did too. My dad used to love to fly fish. We grew up every weekend. We were always in the woods, hunting, fishing, cutting wood, whatever it was. Yep, it was just a wonderful life.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as a kid, I was born in the Midwest, but if we weren't outside in the woods somewhere, then we were in trouble probably more than anything else. We're either out in the woods or in trouble, one of the two.
Yeah, and I think that kind of growing up and being in the beauty of it, but also learning how to endure and be hardy and self-sufficient, personally, I think it's really lacking. And I think that there's a lot of children that would find a lot of freedom in those environments.
Get rid of the phones and go outside.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's stay on your journey. So you go through your divorce. At this point, were you doing what was called My Best Friend or whatever it was called, or Man's Best Friend? When did that start? Where were you?
I was married.
Okay.
Man's Best Friend started when my boys were probably a year and a half, 2 years old.
So you're still in Tennessee at this point?
No, I moved when my boys were 4 months old.
Okay, I got you.
Yep. So I am in Washington State, and my boys are a year and a half old, and I'm realizing that I have to make money. We didn't have enough money to live, and I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and so that's when the whole I'm just going to start a business it's called Man's Best Friend, and I've been trained thousands of dogs through that in the last 27 years.
Well, when you look at what you have your profile on your website, and we'll get that out to everybody that's listening, but you're like involved with, when do you rest?
Oh,
you're on everything.
When I go to bed. It just depends on when that's going to be. And then my dogs are there.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what? This is the thing is like, I get to do this. I am so blessed that my passion of dogs and wanting them to have a better life and to educate the humans so they can, everybody gets a dog because we have our dream of what it's going to be like. We have our, we imagine what it's going to be like. But for a lot of people, that's not the reality.
Sure.
And until you get educated about how to communicate and how to have relationship with a completely different species that's fulfilling for both, then it isn't going to be like that. And my passion is now my purpose.
Right.
And so I'm so blessed because, I'm just not happy unless I have a dog on the end of a leash doing something, because that's where if I'm gone for a couple days and I don't have a dog with me, I miss them so much. So I get to do this, and I'm really blessed that I have this life.
It's funny, and I want to stay on your story, but I just want to add something real quick. There's an episode, my episode's come out on Tuesday, an episode that came out yesterday. Actually, from a week ago, Tuesday, I talk about passion and purpose. That's really funny that you said that. That's pretty funny. So when you were doing your Man Best Friend, I know you talked about trainers. How did you get your skills? Obviously it's innate at some level, but how did you get to your skills? We still haven't even got to what we're really talking about today, but it's all related. How did that work, and how did you figure that out? kind of walk me through your education, so how you got there.
No, well, thank you. Well, I started with Gene England, who won the world championship in Schutzend
Okay.
in 1988. And so he set the bar, and I saw just the precision and the beauty of excellence. And so what I only knew what excellence looked like. I didn't, I mean, it was incredible. And so when I've been blessed to be surrounded by great trainers. I sought them out, and I wanted to just live in their pocket. It's like I just wanted to be where they were. I wanted to learn, and I put in the time and I learned. But then it was also competing. Competing in Schutzend requires you, the attention is in the details to bring the precision.
Sure.
And then when I started training dogs for man's best friend, the dogs are your best teachers. They really are. And so I was constantly trying to learn as I was in the act of doing it all the time. And I learned to adapt myself to every dog, no matter what the age, breed, temperament, or issue, because that's what a good handler will do. A good handler
Sure.
will be able to adapt to what that dog needs you to be. And it's through those years of competing and exposure to dog after dog after dog that I learned, and I perfected my craft. And then I just sought out people that were better than me. I didn't have to agree with everything they did, but I was always looking for that gold nugget. And I still am always looking for that gold nugget to be better. How can I frame it? How can I phrase it to bring better understanding? How can I make it more simple but profound? All of these things that we want to do to help people learn, and to, it's not even help the life of the dog, but there are so many dogs that are suffering in their homes with their people who love them, but they're neurotic, and they're not thriving. And I want dogs to
Right.
thrive, and I want humans to thrive in their relationship with their dog. And it doesn't come by accident. It has to be intentional, and it has to come with correct knowledge and habits. And so, but dogs have been my best trainers, or my best teachers, and they still are.
So how many years before you got into Battle Buddies? And let's talk how you got into it, but how long did it take you to get there? You performed your craft and your skills and continue to do that. How long was that before you started doing Northwest Battle Buddies?
I was a professional dog trainer for about 17 years before I founded Northwest Battle Buddies, because I found
Okay.
they're like 13 years old.
Okay. And so what happened? I mean, obviously you're training dogs, and Battle Buddies trains differently for, well, you tell the story. I don't want, I'm on, you got the story. I can say what I think.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
So, well, yeah, I was just training dogs. I was in where I'm at now on this property, 4-acre piece of property in Battleground. And, I had a thriving business. And the fact that my father served during the Korean War, and he taught me to believe in God, family, and country. And when you're in the presence of a veteran, you're in the presence of a hero, even though he never considered himself one. I would watch my father go shake the hand of a veteran and thank them, but be so uncomfortable if anybody came and thanked him. And my dad was just an incredible patriot. And somebody asked me, did he teach you all that? I said, no, he modeled it. Being in Pendleton, Oregon, at the time when I was growing up, the rodeo every year was the 5th largest rodeo in the United States.
Sure.
And so, and you just don't find a more patriotic event than a rodeo. And so, when the national anthem was going, my dad would be standing there with his hand over his heart and a tear in his eye and a quivering chin every time. And my dad always taught me that freedom wasn't free. And so, even though I don't know what that means, and I still don't, even though I have a better idea. And so I was bathing a dog one day in my business, Man's Best Friend. I have a kennel building here. And, I'm bathing a dog, and a veteran came in looking for help. And because he was a veteran, he got my attention, and I went and served him personally. And it was, Kevin came in with his yellow lab, Sammy, and he wanted her to be trained to be a service dog, to serve him for his PTSD. And I had trained service dogs before, but I had never trained a service dog for a veteran with PTSD. And I didn't really know much about it. And so I assessed the dog, and I just went to do business as normal, business as usual. And, I'm like, yeah, she had temperament enough. I believed she could do it. So he left her with me for many months. I trained her. I got her navigating the outside world, learned about PTSD, learned what she had to task for. And then it was when it came time for Kevin to come train with me that it really changed things for me, because when I would take Kevin out in public, well, first of all, I started to learn about the suicide rate among our American heroes
Sure.
of 22 a day. Sometimes you'll hear 20 a day. Sometimes you'll hear 16 a day. It doesn't matter. One a day is too many.
Well, one of the things I read about that too is that the suicide rate in veterans is 50% more than it is for just a normal person who hasn't been a veteran.
Yes, absolutely. And it's,
Yeah.
well, and when you look at, so according to the Department of Defense, we lose 1.5 lives in combat a day. But on American soil, we are losing 20 veterans a day, 22 veterans. It doesn't matter. But the fact is we have a suicide rate almost 20 times higher,
Yeah.
than in combat. And so, I mean, it's an epidemic. And that's a whole nother show all by itself. But with that being said, when I started to work with Kevin, I started to learn. He was a front gunner in the Army, and he was talking to me about his last firefight that he was in. And the men in his unit that survived that firefight, 6 of them had committed suicide after coming home. And I just couldn't believe it. I remember sitting at my desk, and he'd been self-medicating for years with illegal drugs. Now he was clean. He was heavily involved in the VA and therapy and things like that. But I was listening to his journey, and I was listening to all of this. And it hit me that he's not wearing the uniform anymore, but he's still paying a price for my freedom every day.
What year was this?
Well, it would be 13 years ago. So
it
was 2000, it was 20, we got our 501c in 2012. This was in 2011.
Okay.
Because this happened right before my dad died.
Okay.
And so this was 2011. And so, my dad always said that freedom wasn't free, but I started hearing my dad's words and stuff coming to me as I was working with Kevin, and I was seeing all this. But where things really changed for me is when we went out in public. I would see Kevin struggle. I would see Kevin find courage inside himself to lead his dog where places he was afraid to go alone. And I saw him be willing to do for her what he was not willing to do for himself. When we had to go train, and, here we're going to go to the mall and train. I didn't know he hadn't been in a mall in 10 years. But when I say we're going to go train in the mall, he didn't start whining and be like, what, we have to go where? Can't we make it? He didn't. He just was like, when and where? I'll be there. And I just saw him. And then I saw him when he would start to almost have a breaking point in public. And I was teaching him how to use his dog. And I saw him press through, and I saw him use her as the tool, the piece of medical equipment that service dogs actually are.
Right.
And I just couldn't believe it. And, I've accomplished a lot of things in the dog world. I have the honor of working with multiple police departments, helping them prepare their dogs for the street. Like I said, I have so many dogs that come here with bite histories. And if we can't help them, they're going to be euthanized. We have dogs here that come here and it's their last stop, or they're going to an animal shelter, and even in my competitions, everything that I was doing. When Kevin walked away after passing his testing, I was watching him walk away, and I was watching him walk through the parking lot with his head up and his shoulders back. And I was watching Sammy walk at his side. And I'll never forget the feeling that I significantly made the difference in the quality of somebody's life. And of all the feelings I'd had in my career in the dog world, that was profound to me.
Well, it sounds like. How did he know that? Did he just, was he intuitive about having a dog be his service dog, or where did that come from?
His therapist was encouraging him, because now he was on the track to, he wasn't self-medicating with illegal drugs. He was clean. He was trying to get into the system. He was trying to do it in a more holistic way. And she recommended it. And I hadn't founded Northwest Battle Buddies yet, so he just sought out a dog trainer.
Wow.
But he sought out me, and it was the beginning of. So Kevin walks away, and I'm thinking that's probably going to be it. It's not like I didn't have any aspirations until a Vietnam veteran who knew Kevin rode a bus and found me and showed up at my property and was, he rode a bus to my business, and he walks in, Randy. And he's looking for a dog. He's looking for what Kevin has, because he saw the difference in Kevin.
Right.
And I didn't have dogs to give him. And more veterans came other than just him. They're looking for help. And I thought, if I can just, because I didn't have any way to help him, even though I had all the desire. And then I thought, in my simple-minded thinking, I thought, if I can just adopt dogs out of shelters, I can train them and I can gift them and I can say, thank you for my freedom.
Right.
And I went right out to a dog shelter, Clackamas County Dog Services. They checked out my for-profit business, Man's Best Friend. I had a stellar reputation. And I walked out with 5 dogs right there. I didn't have to pay for one. And in one of those dogs I walked out with was a beautiful blue pit bull named Leia. And once I trained her, I paired her with Randy, that Vietnam veteran that came in. And she lived out her life. In fact, she just died a couple years ago. And she lived out her life with him, and Randy since then has passed away from natural causes. And so, but the fact is that that's what started it, is that I had an experience with a veteran. I saw the profound effect that a service dog can have in the life of an American hero. And then when people were asking for help, my dad always said, you don't know what you don't know. And if I knew how hard it was to do what we do, I'm just grateful I didn't. But I've also, to be honest, I've never shied away from anything hard. So maybe I'd have done it anyway. But, it's been an incredible journey.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Hear that? That's the beginning of a journey powered by the confidence that comes from driving a vehicle so reliable, it's backed by a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty. Where your journey ends? Well, that's up to you. Visit your local Kia dealer today. Kia, movement that inspires.
See retailer for warranty details. Always drive safely. Limited inventory available.
So I have a question. So you've got Man's Best Friend. How did you have to adapt your training? I would assume it has to be different a little bit with them being a service dog for PTSD or whatever else. So how did that change or morph into morph into what it is now?
Well, that's a great question. Obedience is obedience.
Right.
If I'm competing on a competition field in Europe, and part of the competition is my dog has to lay down, be in a down command with me away from it with gunfire going off, I want my dog to stay, right?
Sure.
Well, I want my dog to stay there, no different than I want my dog to stay underneath the table in a restaurant, right? Down is down.
Right.
So not just make that sound all dramatic, because it's not that difficult. So when it comes to navigating the outside world, elevators, escalators, environments, service dogs are not supposed to intrude in other people's lives when they're out in public. They're supposed to be, really kind of under the radar. They're following their handler. They're quiet. They're not intrusive in any way. They're respectful. They're not excitable. They're not barking. None of those things. So obedience is obedience. Respect in your space is respect in your space. All of that actually is the same. One of the biggest differences is
alerting, right? When they're having an episode or something like that, right?
Yes, tasking is huge. And I'll speak to that in just one second. But one of the differences is in the Schutzen sport, I was building drive to where, I was building energy and drive in my dogs. Because when he went to chase the bad guy, I wanted him to explode like a torpedo. So as a service dog, one of the things that's very different is I want that dog to just be calm in his brain, coasting alongside his handler, following every command. But then on top of that, obviously these dogs, in order to be a service dog, they have to task and help mitigate the disability of PTSD, the symptoms of PTSD. So you're right. Our dogs learn pressure therapy, So the veterans, because they are literally they are qualified as a piece of medical equipment. Just like, if a man needs a walker to be able to walk into a store, we have veterans that cannot walk into a store without their service dog.
Right.
And so our service dogs learn to task. They learn how to perform pressure therapy, which as the veterans engage that, it calms their breathing, it slows their heart rate. When they start to share affection, within minutes, oxytocin starts to be released in the veteran's body, which helps them feel better. The whole point is during a panic attack, anything like that, if the veteran starts to escalate, they get to a point where there's almost no return, and fight or flight are next. So we teach our veterans when they start to have a panic attack, so first of all, if the veteran doesn't even recognize they're starting to have one, our dogs will indicate because of the chemical changes of adrenaline and cortisol in their body. And they will start to interrupt those moments. As a quick story, we had a veteran that was on graduation day, and he was doing an interview, which that in itself is profound, that they're doing an interview on graduation day when they're throwing up in our parking lot before training starts because they're so nervous and scared. And then 5 weeks later, they're doing an interview on camera, and the dog was on a down, laying at the feet of this veteran, and he starts to tell his story a little bit. And as he gets emotional, the dog breaks the command and starts to lick his hands.
Right.
And the veteran keeps talking because he's paying attention to the interview and not his dog, because this is still new. But then the dog, because the veteran's not responding, the dog takes it a step further and puts his paw on him and continues to lick his hands. And then the dog continues, and the veteran's still not responding, but still getting emotional. And the veteran gets all the way up with his front legs on his lap and starts to lick his face. And as T-Bone, the veteran, starts to say off, I said, T-Bone, he's tasking for you. He senses you. I said, be in the moment. So we stopped the interview and we allowed him to use his dog to calm him.
Right.
And to then ground himself, and then to continue to move forward but the dog sensed it. Much like a medical alert dog for high seizures, or even high low blood sugar for somebody diabetic. Seizure alert dog or a diabetic alert dog. These dogs are alerting on adrenaline and cortisol.
I wanted to ask you that because I had an episode with the medical mutts they're doing for epileptics and all that. And I was wondering if it was similar, how they were able to tell that.
They absolutely are. Our dogs also wake our veterans up for nightmares, and night terrors. I had one veteran. We just have no idea what these invisible wounds of war, what's happening in the world that our veterans are living in, and how small and isolated they are. And one of our veterans was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, so do you sleep better now that you have your service dog? And he goes, well, actually, I don't. Well, that got my attention. I'm like, what do you mean you don't sleep better? But then he said, I don't actually sleep better, but I'm not afraid to go to sleep now, because Atlas always wakes me up before the worst part of my nightmare. And I was like, it's like, can you imagine being afraid to go to sleep every night?
I read a story about a dog, about a veteran who had been injured. So he had some disabilities with that, but he had asked his trainer, it was a service dog. He also had PTSD, and he asked him if he could train the dog, if they could train the dog to turn the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been a sniper and he didn't want to be in dark rooms. He didn't have the physical capabilities to be able to hit those switch. That was one of the things, but the main thing was he didn't want to be in the dark. And so the dog was able to do both. And they'd asked him about it, and he says, a physical thing I can deal with, but the PTSD is with me all the time. And I thought that was really, intense and heartwarming at the same time.
It is, because they're invisible wounds of war and we don't see it. We don't see the war that is going on inside of them, that they are having to manage, just trying to do their day like everybody else or like they used to be, but they're forever changed. And it's about how to embrace and learn how to press forward in a new life. It's not really a new identity, but a little bit it is, you know what I mean? Because they're different. And it's about embracing that and learning how to move forward with the different modalities that there are to serve them. The thing about a service dog for PTSD is the fact that dog is with them 24/7. And one of the things that's so beautiful and profound is that our dogs are there in the midnight hour when nobody else is. And that's where suicidal ideations are their worst. That is where, when veterans are isolated or alone, completely alone. Well, with a service dog, they're not. And I've gotten text messages, multiple stories of veterans who were tell us that their dog saved their life last night, broke them out of suicidal ideations to help them just get clarity in their brain and bring them back to the moment of now. We've gifted 257 service dogs to our American heroes, and we have not lost one veteran to suicide.
I wanted to ask you that because one of the things, and I wanted to make sure you put that up, is that you're actually giving it to them. You're training these dogs and your foster families and all that. But before we get into that, I wanted to get into a little bit of the history. And I've got some notes, and you may know all that. I'm assuming you probably know more of it, but on PTSD specifically. So one thing that I saw that it was used a term, and I'm going to give you exact dates because I have notes on it, but it said PTSD really was called PTSD. That was 1986.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been going around it's been around forever, which, we hear about it now because modern times, but Civil War, it was called Soldier's Heart.
Mm-hmm.
World War I, shell shock. World War II, battle fatigue. Vietnam, it was called Vietnam syndrome. And they were thinking it was a variety of other things. And they're just, it's always fascinating to me, or depressing at the same level, is how long it takes us to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why shows like this are so important. And I'm so grateful, is because no veteran is going to, it's extremely rare for a veteran that is going to be comfortable or will ask for help. A lot of times the applications are filled out by their families. They're filled out by a loved one, and then they're encouraged to come along, and we do everything we can for them to be, for them to be encouraged and feel comfortable and just trust us. One of our veterans, in an interview is like, look, if you can't trust people, trust a dog, and you were talking about all of the layers of what it was, what PTSD used to be labeled as. And, the Vietnam veteran era.
They thought they were cowards.
Yeah.
That's where that name, when they were talking Vietnam syndrome, many people thought, they were just afraid to be in a war when they've been mentally damaged, basically. And all that. But, it's just sad the way the humans are not very great people sometimes.
No, they're not, honestly. And that's one of the reasons I love my dogs so much.
Yeah.
They're a safe place to be. They're just, but Vietnam veterans, Northwest Battle Buddies, there's a lot of organizations out there, but there's a lot of organizations that only serve post 9/11 veterans and conflict.
Right. I saw the numbers, and that they're huge.
We serve all conflicts. We had Korean War veterans in our program.
Right.
Our 100th dog went to a Vietnam veteran, and he's like, he even said in an interview, I thought my life was over. I didn't know that once I got Bomber, his beautiful golden retriever, I would begin living again.
Right.
And it's like, how do you put a price on that? And I want to say, our dogs are trained, and you may ask me this, but our dogs are trained for 5 months professionally. And then our veterans are trained for 5 weeks, and then they're gifted. We do not charge our veterans for these dogs, even though they cost us $25,000. We do not charge our veterans. They are gifted. Yes, there's an accountability. Yes, we check up on the dogs. There's always continued education. There's yearly certification. There's all of that for the life of the dog, because we're a family.
Right.
We are a family. We are there to support our veterans. As long as they have one of our dogs, there's an accountability, and there is a service that we provide for them. And because we want them to live their life, because that's the whole point of it. It's like, everything in our life begins with freedom. And where would we be without the men and women that provided that freedom to us?
Well, first off, 5 months and 5 weeks, there's way more to that. And too, can you talk about the foster program for the dogs? I know do you start with puppies now, or do you get some older ones as well? Can you walk through how that process works?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we still take rescues, and they might come in at any age. However, they have to be, if it's a rescue coming in, they have to at least be younger than a year and a half if it's coming in as a rescue. But we still take rescues. But now, because we provided 43 service dogs last year, and many of our veterans have children in the home, many of our veterans in the workforce. And so we needed to have access to like English cream golden retrievers, English labs, the floppy-eared dog that everybody wants to invite into their work area. Not everybody wants to have a pit bull mix, or a shepherd dog in the workforce. A lot of people are afraid, and there's a stigma. Now, we have shepherds in our program, and we have pit bulls in our program. I adopted a pit bull out of the shelter and gave it to the Vietnam veteran, Randy, 13 years, 12 years ago. But with that being said, so we do some purpose breeding and we still accept rescues. But our purpose bred dogs at 8 weeks old, they go into foster homes. And the foster's job, their mission, love this dog, make it part of the family.
But pause for a second. Let's walk about how you become a foster, because you're very specific on who gets to do that and your rules and that. Let's go through the whole thing so people realize, when you say 5 weeks or 5 months and 5 weeks, 5 weeks is the minimum training period. 5 weeks is probably the minimum training period for the veterans, but there's way more to it than that you're doing.
There is. So thank you for that. So our foster program, it starts with, first of all, we only allow 5 people in 5 states to foster because we have boots on the ground in those states, because we're very protective of our dogs. We want to be able to serve our fosters. Our fosters go through background checks. We check their home, the other animals in their home, what they may be. The safety of these dogs is of the utmost, it's the utmost priority. And we educate, I mean, there's a tremendous application for our fosters. We get letters of reference. We have secondary people that can take care of that dog, all kinds of stuff. I mean, one of our fosters, if they want to go on vacation, they can't just leave this puppy with a friend or a neighbor. They have to be an approved Northwest Battle Buddies associate, or they come and we take care of the dog, personally, whatever it might be. But there's an exact protocol for absolutely every scenario, even their medications. In the home, the dog, the house has to be puppy proofed. We have to make sure medications are up. The dog, dogs eat stuff. Puppies eat stuff. It's like, we want them to be safe. We don't want them to ingest. We have approved toys, approved food, approved etiquette, what they can and cannot do, because we want that dog to not only grow up and have a wonderful life being healthy and loved, but we want that dog to come back to us. And then we also offer obedience. We offer, whether it's private lessons, depending on where they are, but we also have online courses. We have videos. We have on-phone support. We have monthly check-ins on our fosters. We check their weights every month. We get photos every month. I mean, it is very, very extensive. And we have fosters, but that's their way to give back. Sometimes they're teaching their children. It's a labor of love, because I'm telling you what, when they're dropping out, so they'll raise that puppy for up to a year. And when it's time to drop that dog off, my gosh, the tears, but it's a labor of love, because a lot of times they're teaching their children how to give back to our veterans and to sacrifice.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I personally raised a dog for Northwest Battle Buddies. I named Koa, a black lab, and I'll never do it again. I mean, I can train these dogs. I do this. I couldn't, when it came time for me. Now I wouldn't change it for anything. I wanted to know what our fosters are going through, but I was also starting my YouTube channel.
I couldn't do it.
And so I have a whole series. If people want to see Koa, there's a whole series of videoing, because I videoed his journey while he was living with me as a foster dog. And so I could share that with people. But dang, when it came time for me to introduce him to his veteran, I couldn't hold it together. I was crying. I mean, I was just like, I couldn't hold it together. I was a wreck. And yes, I passed the dog off, and then I helped him, and Koa has absolutely changed Steven's world, but I will never do it again. And we have some fosters that have fostered like 5 dogs for us. And it's just such a labor of love.
Yeah, some people are made for that. That would be a real tough one for me, I think.
Well, I won't do it again. I won't. Dogs, when they come to me, they have to stay with me till their life is over. I'm not built to say goodbye. I'm not.
So once they have them and they go home and they've learned this, do they occasionally have to come in back for like a tune-up session or something like that?
You're talking about our veterans?
The veterans with the dog, that they're just they're doing something, or maybe the dog's doing something, and then they do like a tune-up session or whatever.
So we train, once the dogs leave the foster home, then they come train with us for 5 months.
Okay.
And we teach these dogs everything: on-leash, off-leash obedience, how to navigate life, tasking, pressure therapy, social barrier, social mobility. I mean, everything. All the things that the dog is going to do that we can possibly teach, because some of what they learn is organic, that we mold that once they've been with their veteran. But we train them for 5 months. Then the veterans come from across the nation. We are represented in 28 states. We have veterans in 28 states. And they come from across the nation. They train for 5 weeks, 5 days a week with us. They pass their testing and they are gifted their service dog. They sign a contract with us that states that they will continue to live their life with the character and circumstances that they had what got them qualified. So,
Right.
and they sign a contract and they are the guardians, but we maintain possession. We maintain ownership, not possession. We maintain ownership, but they are the guardians.
They're the guardians and you're the other guardian too, by the way.
Yeah, because the thing is that I tell our veterans all the time, you are our mission, but the dogs are our responsibility. And we love them and they deserve a great life. And even as a service dog, they should have a great life. And so we pair the dogs up, our veterans finish training, and not every veteran makes it through the 5 weeks. It's a qualifier. And
Sure.
but the ones that do, they graduate, the majority do, but they graduate 3 months later, they come back and they retest. We get eyes on the dogs. We check their weights. Yeah, they come back now they don't come back and do another 5 weeks. They come back and do a day.
Sure.
We want to see, because if the relationship is going to start to go sideways a little bit or something's kind of out of balance, we're going to see it in three months. Then they come back 9 months later and they retest. And then they come back every year after that, signing contracts every year for the life of that dog. They are on weight restrictions. They are on medical restrictions. We see all of it. And because we want to renew that accountability. And then if we have a veteran that is struggling in any way, there is a private line for them to call and they can get online support from us. They can get verbal, or they can they just come train with us. We have some veterans that, even if it's a recertification's coming, we're out with dogs all the time. They're like, can I come walk with you in the mall? Can I come do it? And we absolutely, it's like, it is an open door policy for continued education for as long as that veteran has that service dog. Because when it's all said and done, the dog will only be as good as the handler.
Sure. So let's say that from natural causes that the owner passes away. Now the dog's there. Do you guys ever get dogs back? Or, generally, if they don't have a family, what happens to that dog then? Is there any process there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question as well. And I can give you a couple examples. So number one, we're always responsible for the dog. So if somebody did pass away, which this has not happened, where there was no place for the dog to, somebody was like, I really want that dog with, then we would take the dog and very likely it would live in my home. It would come here. We also have people all the time. They're like, if a dog doesn't work out, they would love if the dog was repurposed, if it became a pet. We really try not to do that because we want to keep the dogs in the service world. And I can come back to speak to that in a second. But we had a dog, actually, it was a black lab named Haas, as an example. And Haas was with Walt, Vietnam veteran. Walt died of cancer. But before Walt died, we had these conversations, which were extremely hard.
Sure.
That he's like, I want the dog to go serve another veteran. And the wife wanted that as well. As much as she loved the dog, she wanted what Walt wanted. So when Walt died, Haas came back to us and we turned right around, because the Vietnam veteran, that we turned right around and placed him with another Vietnam veteran. Now, we typically do not place our dogs if they're beyond 2 years old. But if we have a dog that's 4.5, as an example, with many years left of service life, and we pair him with an older Vietnam veteran, I feel it's kind of a safe match, right? So we did. We paired him with another Vietnam veteran named Gordon. And then Gordon passed away. So that service dog served 2 Vietnam veterans. Now, when Gordon passed away, the dog stayed with the wife. We had the discussion and she wanted to keep the dog. And we absolutely let her, because number one, the dog was older in years, but number two, that was an extension of Gordon and it was part of her family. And so it depends on what the circumstances look like. But and the thing is that the family does get first choice, because we're not going to hurt the family a second time by they've lost a loved one and now we're taking a dog, especially from the children. We will leave the dog in that home as part of that family, not as a service dog, but as a pet. If a dog doesn't make it as a service dog, we still want to serve our veterans that qualify for our program. So some veterans can't physically do the 5 weeks. They can't physically do all the walking, all that kind of stuff, but they may qualify through honorable discharge, stable housing and income, PTSD diagnosis, all of the personal referrals, everything that we require to qualify. they qualify, they just can't do the 5 weeks, but they would like to be served with an emotional support animal. So if we have some dogs that are still amazing, they still have an amazing obedience, but they just wouldn't thrive as a service dog. Maybe the outside environment's a little too stressful,
Right.
whatever it might be, they still have great training and they can learn to task. So they're not service dogs, but they can still wake our veterans up from nightmares. They can still perform pressure therapy. They can still alert on their panic attacks and their adrenaline. And so we will then try to repurpose that dog and put it in the home of a veteran that needs an emotional support animal. And that way, the investment is still serving our American heroes. So it's very rare that a dog ever needs to go into a pet home that didn't make it for some reason. It's extremely rare, which is great because we want to protect our donor dollars and we want to protect all of our efforts, making the impact in the industry that is our trajectory. I mean, our veterans need us and we want to serve as many as we can, as efficiently and with excellence as possible.
Well, I saw that the VA has a deal where they can prescribe a service dog and they cover some of the costs. And that's where my question is going to come from. How do you guys fund it? I'm sure you have people that donate, but do you fill out grants or how does that work?
How do we fund our dogs? Our program.
How do you fund your program? Because you're giving away the dogs to gifting the dogs and giving away some of that.
From the very, very beginning, we started just totally grassroots. I mean, our first event was 3 months in. We got our 501c3 in the March of 2012, and our first event was a dog walk in a restaurant parking lot. And I don't know how much we raised, $1,500 or something. I don't know what it was, but it was just small beginnings. The stage that I stood on was a chewed up whelping box turned upside down that I could stand on. I mean, it was but it's, where do we get our funding? Americans that love our freedom and love dogs and love veterans.
Right.
We do get grants, but we are not heavily grant funded.
Right.
We aren't. I mean, we have a monthly giving program. We have businesses that will do fundraisers throughout their entire business with their employees. We have quite the donor relations operation. Just all we do is continue to try to build relationships with people who want to lock arms with our mission and be a part of what we do. And so, but we also do, we try for every grant we qualify for because we need it. We have 140 veterans on our waiting list.
Oh, I can only imagine.
We have more veterans that have applied this last year. We've had more applications come in this last year than in Northwest Battle Buddies history. So the need is not going down. It's actually raising through awareness, through education, through the awareness that a professionally trained service dog, the power and the freedom that it can bring to a veteran's life and their family and community is very profound, and it's just growing. And so we tell people all the time, we need the help of the American people, because as much as I feel the government doesn't do right by our veterans, and they don't, but it is we the people that need to make a difference in the lives of our American heroes, because every free American could do something for our veterans. Their gifts, their talents, their finances, their efforts, their time. We can all do something for our veterans, whether it's through Northwest Battle Buddies or another nonprofit that you might have close to you. I'm just saying, it's an awareness that that just continues to need to have a voice. And that's one of the reasons I'm just super grateful for this conversation, Mark.
Well, one of the things that where U.S. fails and in other countries as well is, and I'm going to use two terms. I'm going to use mental illness and mental injury, because when we're talking PTSD, it's a mental injury, basically. Even you can put them together. And I was surprised when I was, I told you I went deep in this thing, is that the PAWS Act, I'm sure you're familiar with that one. In 2021, finally, VA is doing a 5-year pilot program for service dogs to study it and see the benefits for everybody.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah. Well, I can tell by that laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Yes.
But at least we're doing, at least something. But we fail as a country all the time for people that are in need.
No, I 100% agree with you. When you have men and women that are willing, my twin boys served in the Army and Marines. So I've been on the other side of my boys being deployed, not having the sacrifice that is all the way down the line from families who have lost loved ones in the in service, who loved ones, Gold Star families who have lost loved ones while they were serving. And then you also have families who have lost their loved ones who have served due to PTSD, or then they come back with injury and they're not themselves. And it's just the brokenness, which is profound. And the reason yes, the Pause Act, the awareness, the government needs to be involved, but it's just, honestly, it's not what it doesn't have the effect that you think it's going to, because it's more bureaucracy and it's not set up so for me to watch all of that, I was very excited about the idea of the Pause Act and the VA actually starting to pay for these service dogs. If they're going to prescribe them, which they do, we get veterans come to us all the time and say their counselor from the VA said they should come to us. So that's amazing. And I want that to happen. But because they see the benefit and the effect, it would be nice if they put dollars behind it. But there's a lot of bureaucracy, and that's another conversation.
Sure.
But every free American has the opportunity to make a difference and to be educated and to help pave the way for men and women who are the most selfless, courageous ones that walk among us.
So can you tell everybody how they can help you out, where they can find you, all that other stuff, so we can kind of get that message out too before we get done with this thing?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. So if people go to northwestbattlebuddies.org, it's all spelled out, northwestbattlebuddies.org. Number one, they can donate. They can become they can become a monthly donor, our monthly giving program, and receive emails monthly. We have a Heroes Corner. They hear from our veterans. They see what we're doing. They can stay really close to Northwest Battle Buddies' journey and learn all the great things that we're doing. People can get on there and learn about fostering. People can get on there and learn about how to do a third-party fundraiser. And if you have a loved one that is battling PTSD, tell them. We have so many of our veterans have come to us because of a loved one that paved the way for them and did the work and did a lot of it for them to come in and finally open up their mind enough. But northwestbattlebuddies.org, anybody that wants to be involved in any way, that is the place to go to find out. On our website. You can connect with me, you can email. It would be amazing, because we do need help. We have 140 veterans waiting on our list that are they're just hoping that they can make a difference in their life, with hope and healing on the end of a leash, and so, it's, northwestbattlebuddies.org is where people need to go.
So one thing I meant to ask you earlier, I knew the meaning ahead of time, but can you tell everybody where you got the name Northwest Battle Buddies?
Yes. So in the very beginning, we were working with Kevin, who was a very, very first veteran, and he had his buddy his name was Rhodey. And we were doing a photo shoot, trying to develop some imaging for Northwest Battle Buddies, and just, doing whatever we could to start to get the word out. And they were talking, and I will tell you, in this photo shoot, Rhodey was wearing his boots that still had the blood of his sergeant on his boots, because they got blown up in a Jeep from an IED. And so anyway, it was just profound moments, but they were sitting there having this conversation, Rhodey and Kevin, and they were like, can you imagine going through life with your four-legged battle buddy? And I didn't know what the term battle buddy meant, but the minute they go into the military, they are assigned a battle buddy, and you are responsible for that battle buddy. You don't go anywhere without that battle buddy, and you are responsible. And I was like, what's a battle buddy? But then they were talking about, can you imagine going through, life with a four-legged battle buddy? And then Rhodey goes, that's what you need to call it. You need to call it Northwest Battle Buddies. So I did, because apparently every name that I was coming up with, everybody thought was stupid. And so because a veteran liked it, I'm like, then that's it.
Yeah.
So he's the one that came up with the name, and it's just been the name ever since. Even though we're nationwide, it's Northwest Battle Buddies.
It's a clever name, and it has a real meaning. So that for me, I love stuff like that. Okay, so for everybody who's listening, and I always say this anyways, we're recording this now, but when you're hearing it, I'm going to have all the information that we're just talking about on here, just to make sure you can find it. So if you weren't able to write it down or whatever, if you go to the description area on the podcast, all that stuff's there. So Shannon, this is the part where everybody starts to cringe. I always tell a silly animal joke. I'm going to ask you the joke. Just don't cringe and don't laugh too hard, because I know how bad it is.
Okay.
And we'll do it now. Everybody out there, I know you're dying to hear it, but here's my joke. What kind of dogs tell X-rated jokes?
I don't know.
Smuts. Okay. Now you know how bad they
Very
are.
good. That's cute.
It's cute, but you know what I mean. Anyways, for you guys listening, as I say every week, if you've got, obviously, I'm looking for people to tell the jokes. So if you've got a nephew, a niece, a grandson, children that want to tell the jokes, if you email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com, I promise you they will be on the show and you can listen to your loved one tell the jokes and me have less pain. Also, for everybody that's listening, if you've got a good idea for an episode, something's important like this one or whatever, please send me an email and let me know. I do respond to everybody that's there. But most importantly, really, thank you so much for being on the show, Shannon. I really, really appreciate it. I think it's an important message. You're doing amazing work for some amazing people out there. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share the message and share the stories of our veterans, because they're not going to ask for help.
Right.
And they really do need us. And this gives people an opportunity. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to share the message and to be highlighted and for all of your time. It was a great interview. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And for everybody that's out there listening, as I always say, thank you really from the bottom of my heart, for real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.
Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply at lifemd.com. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
If you've struggled for years to lose weight and have given up hope, did you know you can now access GLP-1 prescription medications through LifeMD? LifeMD is now offering eligible patients online access to GLP-1s, the breakthrough prescription medication that can help you lose body fat and weight. Listen to what people are saying.
I've been able to live my normal lifestyle, and I've lost 20 pounds already. It changed my life.
I wasn't expecting it to shut off the food noise. This was life-altering, and if I can do it, I feel like anybody can do it.
And here's the best part. Your insurance may cover 100% of the cost of your medication. So go to trylifemd.com to have your eligibility checked right now. Get started today at trylifemd.com. That's trylifemd.com.
If you've got kids, join me, Jana, on Story Nori, the Stories podcast. Meet Birdie, an ancient wise old bird, and best friends with a young boy called Jake. He's always around when Jake needs advice and help. And follow the adventures of Jimmy Mouse. Follow Story Nori and let your imagination soar, just like Birdie.